darkness in her room was thick, suffocating like a living thing. Emma lay on her back, her eyes wide open but unable to move. I'd been here before, trapped in the confines of her own body, completely paralyzed. Unable to scream, unable to wake herself up. Sleep paralysis. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her chest rising and falling in slow, painful rhythm. She could hear her own heartbeat like a drum in the quiet room, pounding in her ears. But it wasn't the silence that made her skin crawl, it was what she knew was lurking in it. First time it happened, she thought it was a dream. She thought she was just tired, or maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. But as the episodes began to occur more frequently, Emma realized this was something far worse. Something real. It always started the same way, a shadow moving in the corner of her vision, creeping just out of reach. A dark, shapeless figure that seemed to watch her from the edges of her room. She could never make out its face, but she knew it was there staring. It was worse when she was alone, which at night she always was. This time she could feel it, the weight of its gaze pressing down on her, colder than the room around her. The stillness of the night seemed to amplify the fear in her chest. Emma tried to move her fingers, her toes, anything please, just a small movement. But her body refused. Her limbs remained heavy like they were made of stone. She wanted to scream, to shout for help, but her throat was locked. She couldn't make a sound. She could only lie there, trapped, paralyzed under the weight of whatever was watching her. Then she felt it. A cold breath, low and deep, like someone standing just beside her ear, whispering, "I see you." Emma's eyes snapped toward the sound, but she couldn't turn her head. She couldn't look away from the corner where the shadows gathered. It was closer now to close. She could feel it, like it was right there. The whispering continued, soft at first, but then growing louder and more distinct, each word dripping with malice. "You can't escape me. I've been waiting so long." Emma's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She could feel it, the presence of the thing. So close now that she could almost smell its foul breath. She wanted to close her eyes to block it out, but she couldn't. Her eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead at the darkness she couldn't escape. Then, as though sensing her desperation, the figure moved. It was slow, deliberate, crawling across the room with a grace that defied logic. Emma's breath hitched as it approached her bed, its outline shifting, expanding like a wave of ink spreading through water. She saw it now. Not its face, but its form. Tall and hunched, with limbs far too long. Its hands, fingers too many, stretched out like claws, hovering just above her chest. Its legs bent in unnatural ways as it stood over her, its presence pressing down on her, suffocating her. Emma couldn't breathe. She couldn't scream. Her body refused to react, trapped in the nightmare of her own mind. "You know I'm here." The whisper was louder now, a low growl. "You can't run. You can't hide. I'll always be with you." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she felt its cold breath against her face. She tried to close her eyes to block out the horror, but they wouldn't shut. She couldn't escape it. And the worst part, it knew that. The creature's fingers brushed against her skin, sending an icy shock through her body. It felt like ice-cold needles pricking her flesh, and the worst part was she couldn't move. She couldn't even flinch. The shadow leaned down closer, its face now just inches from hers. Emma could see its eyes, black, empty pits of nothingness. But they weren't just empty. They were her. They reflected her own face, her own wide, terror-filled eyes. She could feel its fingers now sliding down her face like icy tendrils. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream. She was utterly powerless. And then, the worst thing of all, it smiled. Not a normal smile, but a grin so wide, so unnatural, it seemed to stretch across the thing's face, until its mouth was impossibly large, its teeth too sharp and too many. With that smile, it whispered, a slow, drawn-out hiss that made her blood run cold. "This is just the beginning." And with that, the creature slowly retreated, slinking back into the corner, fading away into the shadows like a nightmare that would never end. Emma's body finally unlocked. She bolted upright, gasping for air, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. But when she looked around, the room was still empty. No shadow, no presence, just silence. But she knew. She knew it would come again. It always did. And the worst part, she couldn't stop it. She couldn't escape. Every night, the thing would come back. It would always come back.